In our previous episode of Anatomy Stories, we already introduced the anatomist Louis Bolk, or Lodewijk Bolk, because of his interest in human evolution, and for that purpose took his collection of monkeys and apes preparations, like you can see over here. In this episode, we will again look at preparations of Louis Bolk, but in this case, these are human anatomical preparations. Preparations that would not seem relevant for anatomists both in the past but also in the present, but still very much worth looking at. But it wasn't only Bolk who collected these preparations. Throughout the museum's history, anatomists would gather them. We are talking about tattoos. The museum counts about 12 tattoos in its collection. And if we look at them, the lower 4 are from the early 19th century, collected by father and son Vrolik. The middle 4 are from the early 20th century, collected by Bolk. And the top 4, at least 2 of them, are from the late 19th century, collected by Willem Berlin and by Furbringer. And it's interesting how these tattoos entered the collection, because usually they were just discovered on bodies that were during dissection in the anatomical laboratories, and they were seen as beautiful or special enough to be kept. And that's also mainly what is described about them. In almost all of the catalogs, they are only described as beautiful tattoos and nothing else. The one exception is this tattoo by Vrolik, in which he mentions that it's the tattoo of a soldier. But for the rest, it's only a description of beautiful tattoos. And what you see on these tattoos varies, but in some cases you actually see that they're typical nationalistic tattoos in the sense that they show the Dutch flag and other symbols of nationalism. So we will look at 3 of these tattoos of the Vrolik collection into more detail. 2 of them are actually from the Bolk collection, so the beginning of the 20th century. That are those 2. And 1 is from the original Vrolik collection, and it probably dates from the late 18th century or early 19th century. But if we look at these 3 together, then we can see that all 3 of them have an additional color next to black, and that's red. And in most, well, those 2, you can see that the red has rather fainted, probably because it's been in the jar for quite a long time. But in this case, the red or orange maybe is very, very clear. And to me, that seems to be an indication that it has been added later on, because it's that somehow the original red or orange is faded, and that before it went into the jar, they added that red color, probably vermilion, to indicate those orange spots. What is also interesting about these 3 tattoos, and especially indicated in these 2, is that most of our tattoos in our collection seem to be tattoos from either sailors or soldiers. And then, of course, looking at this one, we clearly see that this is a sailor's tattoo. Not only because of the ship that you see here, but also because of the lady that you see balancing on that ball. This lady is Lady Fortune, and she is balancing on the orb or the globe, because of course her balance determines what your fate will be. In her hands she has a wind vane, and that wind vane is especially relevant for the sailors, because that wind vane determined where the wind will blow to. Essential, I would say, for a sailor to know where the wind goes, and that you have good winds directing you to your destination. This clearly is a soldier's tattoo, and that's not only indicated by the man that you see standing here in the corner with his rifle next to the gallows, but also because of the letters that are on this tattoo, saying Aceh 1873-74. And that's an indication of the Aceh War, a war that the colonial Dutch army fought against the province of Aceh in the northern part of Sumatra. The Dutch colonized Indonesia in the 19th century, already in the 18th century, and more they tried to expand and try to conquer parts of Indonesia. This Aceh War was quite a terrible war that lasted up to 1914. It was a bloody war, also because, of course, the Aceh people really tried to defend their country via a guerrilla way, fight a war against the occupying Dutch army. But in this case, this tattoo shows that the soldier only served 1 year, and probably he went back to the Netherlands afterwards. By the way, we don't know who that lady is that you see in the other corner. Likely it was the soldier's wife or his lover. We don't even know if this lady came from Indonesia or was Dutch. These are all questions that probably will never be answered. And finally, there is this tattoo. This is likely the oldest tattoo that we have in our collection. It's from the late 18th century or the early 19th century. And what is so interesting is it shows an orange tree. And those orange dots are oranges. And below it you see it says Vivat Oranje. And that means that this is a tattoo of an orangist. Someone who was an adherent of the House of Orange and really wanted the reinstallment of that house as stateholders or kings in the Netherlands. At that time, the Netherlands were not a kingdom yet. There were different parties who were opposed to each other. The Orangists wanted that House of Orange back, and there were the Patriots who really wanted to keep the Dutch Republic a republic. That orange tree, that symbol of the Orangists, was not only seen as a tattoo, but also often appeared in, for instance, plates of watches or on clocks. And it was really an indication that the owner of those watches or clocks was a Orangist. Likely the higher classes would have a watch with an orange tree on it, and more the lower classes would have a tattoo stating they were Orangists. What is also interesting about this tattoo is that in the catalogue of Vrolik, he describes how this type of tattoos were made. He describes they would use either nails or pins and then poke them into the skin, and afterwards they would rub it with gunpowder. And as such they would create these handmade tattoos. So to us now in 2022, these tattoos are especially valued as historical documents instead of anatomical relevant preparations. But in the days, of course, when these tattoos were put in the jars, they were not seen as historical documents because they were contemporary. So why then were these tattoos put in jars? Likely simply because of curiosity. They were discovered on the bodies and seen as beautiful tattoos, a term that is also described in the catalogue more than once. And then they were kept because of that purpose. And as such, maybe these tattoos were seen similarly as preparations were collected in the 16th century or in the 17th century in the days of cabinets of curiosities or cabinets of wonders. In that sense, these tattoos stand in that very, very old tradition. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, please write them down below. And, of course, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. We hope to see you next time.